Welcome to the Expert Exchange, the podcast where knowledge meets success. In today's show, we're going to be discussing networking with a purpose, building your professional network. Joining me on today's show is our expert guest, Laurie Canepa. Laurie is currently the Managing Director of Texas of Finance and Accounting Search for StevenDouglas. So you can find more about Laurie and the whole StevenDouglas team over at StevenDouglas.com.
At Lion Business Advisors, selling a business is not just a transaction. You've poured your heart and soul into your business. It's not just a paycheck, it's your legacy. The team at Lion Business Advisors is here to guide you through the process, ensuring your successful exit. Contact the team at Lion Business Advisors at 800-525-3542. That's 800-525-3542, or visit us at lionbusinessadvisors.com. Lion Business Advisors. Let the story of your next chapter begin with us.
So get ready to expand your horizons and refine your network as we dive into networking with a purpose, building your professional network. Joining me today is Laurie Canepa. Laurie has been featured in Austin Women magazine and is an ongoing panelist for multiple organizations, active with nonprofit organizations such as Impact Austin, the Professional Women of Williamson County, Dress for Success Austin, the Job Seekers Network, and the Buccaneer Bridge Monitoring Program. Laurie earned her Bachelor of Science degree at Charleston Southern University in South Carolina with a minor in Spanish and has attended a Master's of Science and Taxation program in San Jose State University. Laurie excels at placing positions from mid and senior level finance and accounting professionals to C-suite roles in organizations ranging from nonprofits to global publicly traded corporations. Prior to joining StevenDouglas, Laurie spent over 15 years as a partner and division director of one of the top boutique accounting and finance search firms in Texas. As a top producer, she played a critical role in bringing the firm to its pinnacle, creating major growth opportunities and an array of successful placements. Over the first 10 years of Laurie's career, she spent getting hands-on experience in the world of public accounting, as well as executing industrial accounting as a corporate controller. Wow. That is a mouthful.
It's a lot.
Thank you for joining.
Makes me feel old.
Welcome to the Expert Exchange, Laurie. Before we really kind of dive into networking with a purpose and talking about that, especially here in Austin, why don't you take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself, StevenDouglas, and kind of what's going on over there?
Sure. So my name is Laurie Canepa. I am the Managing Director for StevenDouglas over the whole state of Texas. StevenDouglas is not a new brand. We're just a newer brand of Texas. We've been around for over now 41 years. I was their flagship employee that they hired 3.5 years ago to expand their presence here. So we cover the markets of Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston, and then everything in between. And like I said, we're accounting and finance specific, not functions. We're function specific, not industry specific. As you mentioned, I started my career out as a controller and started out in public accounting, and then have worked in this world for almost now 19 years. So I think our differentiator, our perspective is a little different because I sat in the seat before, right? Been a candidate, a hiring manager, those kind of things. So that's a little bit about us. Originally grew up in the Northeast, but had been here for over 20 plus years. So Austin's an interesting place to be right now, that's for sure. I would say from a business perspective, we definitely have, I would say, more companies coming here than leaving here, which is typically good for my business.
Yeah.
It creates a demand versus supply.
Yeah.
For sure.
And as we, talk about the networking here in Austin, I think this is a great topic. I think networking here in Austin has changed over the last, I'd say, since COVID.
Absolutely.
And there are so many valuable groups here in Austin, and networking in Austin is super easy to do right now. It's really easy to get plugged in here in Austin, whether you've been an Austinite for 20 plus years, an original Austinite, or someone who's brand new. So,
but then it's like how to choose.
Yes.
Right. And some of what I'm going to share with you, I've learned by trial and error. I've learned those. I think we all know we've gone to those networking events where you're there for 10 minutes and you're like, oh, I can't believe I committed to this. So some of this I've learned really by kind of attending events. And then really when you talk about networking, when they say Austin's weird, it is. I mean, from the outside, we look like much bigger town than we really are. I mean, I think we are still a middle market town, and we only have 50 publicly traded companies here, and some of them are smaller in nature. So it is very still like who knows who. Everybody's 2 to 3 degrees of separation. So you do have this incredible opportunity, even from a networking perspective, to find someone in your network, like you and I both, have you been to that group before? What did you like about it? What didn't you like? Do you know my skill set? Do you feel like work smarter, not harder?
Yeah.
Like, reach out and say, hey, did you attend that group? Do you think that that's a good group for me? What did you like about, what didn't you like about it, right? Like when I joined Provisors, Josh and I are both part of the same networking group here in town, and I had kind of tried before I buyed. I wanted to make sure that it was something that really spoke to me, right? So I think that always having an opportunity to kind of use your own network to find out what you should be networking in makes a lot of sense as well. And in this smaller town, you have an opportunity. And some of it, like I said, there is going to be a little trial and error a little bit, but finding the ones that really speak, like where you see like that speak to your industry or your function. Like for me, there's a couple, ACG here in town. They do a great lunch. They have some great presenters, but I always look at who's the keynote speaker, because the keynote speaker, and I would say that's really for any networking event. When you look at the keynote speaker, you have to think about who's going to be the dynamic of, like who in your
who's
world,
going to come listen,
who's going to take away something from that speaker is valuable. So when I see like a CFO speaking, or like next Wednesday, the CEO of he is now at Easy Tiger, but he was a former CEO of P. Terry's that I know very well. Todd's an incredible speaker. I have seen him. I've worked with him before. He's a client. So I'm absolutely going to go, like, I know the dynamic of what that audience might be are people that might play in that same space, right? But some of it, unfortunately, is sometimes of trial and error. But if you can prevent that at all, using your own network to say, hey, did you attend that? Does that make sense for me?
One of the things I want to hit on, one of the reasons why we asked you to come in and talk about this episode, or this topic, is you are a networking master, especially here in Austin. So, Laurie, you have roughly 33,000 followers on LinkedIn and are rated a top 25% recruiter on LinkedIn.
I am.
How did you get that? Because that is a massive, I consider myself to be a fairly good networker, and I have nowhere near that many followers or am getting ranked to percentages. So how'd you get that?
Time and patience. I've been on LinkedIn a long time, but I think also, and some of this again, I think one of the things when you talk about, if you are putting out content, if you keep putting out the same content and you're not, and you expect the same reaction, like you have to change up what you're doing. If something's not working, do something different, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, and you can spend all day thinking about what you're not doing, but you got to do something else. If you're doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, that's not how it works, right? So for me, I've kind of learned, for me in particular, for my followers, really changing up my content on LinkedIn and thinking about like what's valuable to my audience, what's a value add. So I think in my world, recruiters like to just like post jobs like all day long. Like, while I do post jobs because obviously that's interesting. And part of this is actually asking my audience, like, what would you like to see more? So I think content that speaks to them from an educational perspective, like what's going on with the Texas chapter of CPAs? Are they changing the hourly requirement on things? Like those kind of things. Then also speaking to something like I was telling you before, like I had an opportunity to see a CFO speak in a fireside chat regarding a SaaS and what the difference between AI and human error looks like. AI, those kind of things. So I try to keep the content fresh, but I also keep it very consistent. I think that is really key. My team every Tuesday does Top Talent Tuesday. My followers know every Tuesday, Laurie's going to post up like her hot candidate of the week, and that might be something that's interesting to me. So I think consistency, and when you do this, it's like any habit. I think sometimes when people post on LinkedIn, they're like, oh, it's like an additional thing. Any habit takes 30 days to create. I think people look at it like it's a task. Make it a habit, and then it's just part of your job, right? But it has taken a while. I do challenge myself. Every Monday, I write down how many followers I have, and then on Friday, I see how many followers I'm competitive, right? So on Friday, I want to see how many followers I have, and if it hasn't increased by a certain percentage, then I know that I need to change up maybe what I'm posting, during content. So, but I also write some articles as well. One commitment I've made for myself for 2025, I just did one earlier this week about, is your social media presence sabotaging your career search, right?
Yeah.
And I put some really good, and I think I don't even know how many hits on that in like a very short period of time. So I think you have to think about, this is specific to my world, but you have to think about, like in my world, if I was a candidate or I was a hiring manager, what would I see or what would I follow, and not overkill? Like you have to remember, and every industry is different. I would say when you see something out there on LinkedIn that's like 6, 7, 8 paragraphs long, do you really read it? I mean, maybe a little bit, right? I mean, do you have the time to do that? So, trying to...
It has to be really engaging.
Really engaging, right? Like keep your content like valuable, but in a short period of time. And then I think proactively connecting with those people that you want in your audience. Typically when you connect with someone, they're going to go back and follow you, right? So you got to think about that as well. So it's taken some time over the years, but I also think it's because, and I think when you actually make your content, I think authenticity is so important.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about this earlier, like ChatGPT, great tool, but don't let that remove the authenticity about you. Like I know sometimes when I put something into ChatGPT, like all my ideas, and then it writes it up, it doesn't sound like me, right? So I have to kind of go back. Some of it's really good and some of it's not so good. And then I kind of use it. It helps me get at least a format. And then I can pull out what makes it sound like me and what doesn't make it sound like me. And your followers recognize that. You want to be, when you really know you're kind of at a networking like guru level, is when you walk into an event and someone says, Josh, I don't know you, but I feel like I know you. And that has happened, probably only over the last maybe like 3 or 4 years, really.
Mm-hmm.
But that is because you're being genuine, you're being authentic, your content is different. They know you're not just posting like every single other person. And I know that's a really long answer to a short question, but it's not just one thing, right? I also think my followers have to do where I'm networking outside of social media, like my in-person presence when I'm going to these others. So when you talk about networking, it's kind of a trifecta, right? It's not just your business development outreach. It's also the networking events the FaceTime that you're having as well, in addition to your social media presence. It's not just one thing, right? I think my followers on LinkedIn are also because of the people that I've met. If I've gone and met someone, all of a sudden they're sending me an invite about, I just met you. We had a really great conversation, or I really like what you had to say. I want to be able to follow you on LinkedIn, right? So it's not just all stemming from the production or what I'm putting on LinkedIn. It's also from the in-person, which is so valuable when it comes to when you're talking about networking.
I think it is valuable to point out the social media side of this, and LinkedIn specifically is a very valuable networking tool. When someone comes onto our firm as a new advisor, one of the first things we do is we actually have a template for how to clean up your LinkedIn profile. And we say, hey, look, these are the things that you need to do because people are looking, they're watching, whether you like it or not. They're checking you out and they're liking and watching. And so when you relate that back to networking, you hit on it, and we'll dive into it a little more, but networking is all-encompassing. It is now in-person, meeting with people. There are virtual events, but it's also social media, and LinkedIn happens to probably be the primary spot for that.
And you just hit on something, because the article I wrote yesterday on is your jobs career search, is your social media specifically LinkedIn sabotaging your career search without you really knowing it? And you said cleaning it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there are platforms that are built for certain things.
Yes.
No one is saying don't be authentic and don't be yourself, but be careful what you like, be careful what you share, be careful what you comment on. Like, and not to say that we don't want you to be the best version of yourself and authentic, but there is a place and time for everything. And there are other platforms for that, and I think the last thing you want is someone not to connect with you or want to network with you or in my world, want to work with me as a client or a candidate because they feel like I feel discriminatory one way or another, right? And people don't even realize sometimes when they're doing it, right? And so you just got to be really careful. And again, I think some people are like, well, that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
We're not saying not be who you are. We're just saying this is a professional platform, and that's always what it was meant to be. And so I think, like I said, but we talk about all the time internally as well. Yeah.
Let's dive into that now. There are really so many different types of events, especially here in Austin. And I would say too, what we're talking about today is not Austin specific. Some of the groups, if we name them, might be Austin specific, because we tell people all the time, ACG might be huge here in Austin, but in Dallas, the big M&A group is AM&A, Advisors of Mergers and Acquisitions. So don't take these names if you're outside of Austin, but there is a group. It just might be under a different name wherever you're at. But so let's talk about how someone can determine what events are the best use of their time, right? There's social media events, there's virtual networking events, there's in-person events. So how does someone go about determining what is actually going to be the best use of their time?
Well, as we talked about earlier, I think looking to see which ones touch upon your industry or play in your space, really looking at those, because I think some of the events that you go to, as an example, here in Austin, the ABJ puts out some incredible events, right? But I would tell you some of these events are not really created for networking. Like if a company is going to celebrate, they are being like best places to work in Austin. That is a great event. That is a huge event. But does anyone want to really talk shop with you? Not necessarily, right? I mean, I would say it was same with like the Best CEO Awards. great event, fantastic. It's an invite-only event. It's a lot of CEOs that bring their families, whether it's their significant others and their kids. While you'll meet some great people, is that where they want to hear your pitch? No, not at all. So I think really being able to read the room is incredibly important when you go to some of these events, because you can easily come across, like we use the term like sales carsman, used car salesman, right? And that's the last thing is you want to come across. So it's not that you can't go to the events and meet these people. You just have to think about all you have is typically time in your world, what makes the most sense, and what is going to be my ROI on that, right? Yeah. So really networking, like I mentioned earlier, with other people in your space, to really think about which one makes the best, the best sense for me. I think really going on to LinkedIn and looking at some of the groups too, like being part of groups that are in your vertical too, really kind of help determine maybe kind of, what networking group, and what networking groups work for you. And then often I can tell you, if you sign up for a networking event, if you ask, some of us just don't ask, you can actually get the attendee list ahead of time.
Yeah.
If you ask, and then you can, and I'm not saying sign up and then don't sign up. Yeah. What I'm saying is at least you kind of have a good understanding of what you're walking into and you can plan. I think planning, like I'm getting ready to go, you mentioned ACG, to their TACC event in Houston, which is huge private equity. It's called like the Deal Source event. It's huge. It's like 100, 200 private equity firms. If I don't plan, everybody's going to already been planned meetings and pre-plan. You got to plan too. Yeah. So you got to think about, you're never going to be able to reach every single person in that room. So if you can get that attendee list ahead of time, or at least know some of the people that are going, you can turn that networking event into something else, not just kind of going in blindly, because you're going to notice when you walk in, like you're going to see little pods of people, and it's going to
known each other for years.
Who've known each other for years, and that's because that's comfortable. If you go to a networking event, you're going to have to do things that are uncomfortable. That's part of it. And I will tell you, it is uncomfortable going into a room of people that you don't know. You have to. But it's like anything. The more you do it, the easier it gets. The less you do it, the harder it gets.
I can say that. So with my own personal networking journey, I am not generally an extroverted person, and when you throw me in a happy hour with 50 people, I can very easily grab my little old-fashioned, sink back into a corner and talk to no one. Over the last few years, it's just been hey, this is how you grow business. This is what you need to do. And forcing myself to get out there, talk to someone, meet someone new. And the value from doing that is immense. And so there's, we run a small Main Street deal acquisition networking group through the Texas Association of Business Brokers. And we try to tell people, hey, look, we do a lunch and a happy hour, and then we do a holiday event. All three are very different. And depending on what it is that you're trying to get out of the group, the lunch is more for education for business brokers. So if you're trying to come in and sell, again, it's probably not going to be the best place.
Right.
We do the quarterly happy hours with that event. That is where the networking hits. That is where everybody goes and chats and meets new people. And it's funny, we do the holiday event. And like you were hitting on, it's a read the room. That is not. Right. It is our holiday event is bring your spouse, bring your significant other, and let's just relax and enjoy the day. And we do a fundraiser and stuff like that. And, won't get too into it, but it was this year, someone was super hard trying to pinch me. And I'm like, man, I've got 150 people here and I'm trying to keep a schedule. Yeah. Now is not the time to pitch me. And it's like, I'm walking that fine line of I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's like, read the room. I have got a 3-page schedule that I'm adhering to, and we are raising funds for a nonprofit, and we need to move. So it's definitely reading the room. And I think one of the things that might be unique about Austin is, like you said, you can ask, and people will tell you if it's a good fit for you. They'll literally say, hey, here's who's going to come. If you're trying to get in front of XYZ, this is the group you need to go to. And I don't know if that happens everywhere else, but it definitely happens here in Austin, and I love it. So.
And I always, like you said, you have one time to make a first impression, right? And if you come across as that overly aggressive, salesy type person, like it's okay to be like, hey, I know you're super busy. Can I just give you we can catch up? It's a respect. It's a mutual respect thing for sure. I challenge myself because I know this sounds crazy, but I'm kind of more of a introverted extrovert, right? It's a thing, right? And so I will make sure that I want to walk away from that event with at least 3 new contacts, maybe 5 if I'm pushing myself, because I will get sucked into, because I've been doing this for 18 years. Oh, Laurie, come talk. And I love to talk to you, but I've known you for 10 or 11 years, right? And you happen to be at a lot of networking events that I'm at. Love you, but I want to make some
We already know we work together.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of already know my shtick, right? So I really kind of push myself to at least walk away from there with at least 3 new people. And I actually do that with my team too. I tell my team when we walk into an event, I want you to at least walk away with 3, because they kind of same thing, like you kind of, it's human nature. It's comfortable for you, right? And then you're like, oh, it was a networking, event and it wasn't productive. Well, was that the event or was that on you, right? So now I'm kind of the same way for sure.
So you hit on the power of first impressions, right? So let's talk about authenticity. How can professionals make sure that their networking efforts are more authentic than transactional when they're at these events?
I mean, I think people want to like who they work with. They just do. And so you've got to be able to have like a two-way engaging conversation. And you've got to be able to say, you have to make it about them, not about you. If you make it about like, this is what I want, people are looking, you got to think about like, what would be valuable to them? Like, for instance, I'll use an example that I use. So if I'm talking to a CFO and maybe we get to a point where he's like, well, I don't really know if I want to use recruiters, or I'm not really sure about that. I'm like, well, here's the thing. Whether you're ready to use me or not, use me for local market intel, right? Like salary guides in this town, not the greatest, and really haven't kept up with, I would say, the market, especially over the last 2 years. Give me a call. I can tell you in about 3 to 5 minutes what someone's paying for your company size, your industry, and the level of the role that will keep you highly competitive in Austin. And that I'll do for you for free, whether it's someone on your team that you want to promote, whether you're not quite ready to use us, you just need a market reference point, or even for yourself, right? So you got to think about what would be, because I think sometimes we go into it like, what can we get out of it? What can we get out of it? You will get something out of it, but it's all about your approach. You can't make it about you. Like, you've got to make it about more like, so tell me more about you and your company, and do your homework. Like, do your homework so that you actually know, if you plan and you know who you want to talk to at that event, about their industry. You can say, oh, I just saw that article that came out on XYZ company, or, hey, congratulations, you just got promoted. You have to make it softer and more personable, versus you have to think about who you're competing against. You're in your differentiator. If you come across with the same, hey, I'm Laurie Canepa, I'm a recruiter, I work in accounting and finance, they're going to be like, oh, and you can read it. Like, if you see that happen, because it's happened to me, especially earlier in my career, you got to switchly pivot from that. You've got to be able to pick up on that. And this is something you learn over time and more, it's emotional intelligence, right? And you've got to be able to quickly pivot that conversation and stop making it about you. You got to be able to, like, you can see it in their eyes. They're like, oh, here we go again, right? And you're like, okay, I got to switch up. Like, let me make it something they clearly either don't want to talk about that right now. So let's talk about something more about them, their company, or the event, something like that. You've got to kind of quickly shift gears. And that's something that you only learn by doing it more and more.
Being authentic and doing that. So I think building long-term relationships, right? I think that's probably the biggest value in these networking events. So what strategies do you use to maintain and nurture your professional relationships over time? So you went to the event, you got the 3 business cards. What do you do next?
I mean, I think for me specifically, when I go to an event and I've just met someone and I feel like I have a good conversation, I follow up with them pretty quickly. Just because they've probably met a lot of people. You're kind of fresh in their mind, right? And you're like, and it's not overly aggressive. It's like, hey, I thought we had a really good conversation. I just want to make sure that you had all my contact information on hand. And when I send them an email, I make it super easy for them to search. And I know this, and this is something I've learned over time. So in the title, I literally put my name, my company, and what I do. Because I've actually had CFOs tell me, like, I hadn't talked to you or worked with you in a while, but I knew when I needed an accounting and finance recruiter, I went to my inbox and I did a search on finance and accounting recruiters, or, whatever, and that your name came up, right? So it's a little trick that maybe I've used over time. Now, when I follow up with them, it's more about super casual. I just met you. It's not like, hey, let's go meet again, or that kind of thing. I kind of leave it like short to the point. Sometimes less is more in this business.
Yeah.
But then I also, the day I do that, I put on my calendar to follow up. Not tomorrow, not the next day, but within a timely manner, right? I usually try to follow up when I have a contact like that, or a contact that I feel like is a target client or candidate of mine. I do it usually within a week or 2 weeks period of time, and I put that on my calendar because that's where you lose without your differentiator also will be follow up. I have so many clients that have given me job orders or searches because I actually followed up. Because a lot of, you'd have to say at least 70% don't.
Yeah.
So like they reach out and say, hey, Josh, can I help you with that CFO search? And then they never hear from them again, right? And it can be as simple as that. Someone picks you because you're just really exemplifying what you do and that you're really good at follow-up, you're really good at planning, and it just says something about how you run your business, right? So I call it politely aggressive. It's like I'm not the I joke all the time with my hiring managers. I'm like, I'll be the stalker if you'd like me to be, but most aren't.
Yeah.
So it's just being more respectful of that too, but really making a strategy and a plan because, again, most don't follow up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's funny. The little calendar trick, people will laugh at me. They'll say, hey, I'm not ready now, but follow up with me in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that's generally a polite way of saying go away, right? But I'm the guy who goes, okay. And 6 months from now, I have a calendar task in there and it has my notes and it syncs to all my things.
Mm-hmm.
And in 6 months, I'm following up with you and saying, hey, how's it going? Great chatting with you. And it's, for us, we've had clients that from the initial time we met them to the time that they actually engaged with us is 3, 4, 5 years. And they keep going, no, I'm not ready, but maybe after summer, maybe after this. And I am absolutely that guy that goes, okay, not a problem. I'll leave you alone until when you said this date. And so I haven't employed that on the networking side. So it's
a mutual respect factor, right? I mean, it's like when I was a controller and I would have vendors show up for like unplanned meetings, like solicitation. I'll always meet with anybody who actually calls me, emails me, and wants to schedule time. You showing up without and I know in my world, they teach a lot of recruiters to do that. Drop in. I don't know anyone in my world that loves that. I didn't love it. I didn't, I was like, I'll always meet with you and make time for you. But I think there's a mutual respect, the fact that I actually have a schedule and I'll always get you on that calendar. But for you just like to randomly drop in and think that I'm going to make time, like everybody has a different perception on that.
Yeah.
But I know in my world, my clients would not love that. Yeah.
I am absolutely not a fan of the drop-in. And even on my calendar, I'm not a fan of the drop-in on my calendar. Like I have hey, book some time on my calendar, but it's like, man, you better tell me what we're doing first. The closest I think I get to a drop-in is with some of our referral partners. We'll go take them, breakfast, tacos or something like that. But even then, I actually reach out to the business owner beforehand and say, hey, this Friday, you're going to have some people in the office. I'd love to drop some stuff by. And I tell them like, don't need a meeting, don't need any of your time, just want to say thanks, and there you go, right? So
we do that too. And we do it ahead of time because sometimes I also need to know, do we have a bunch of vegans? Like do you want brisket tacos or do you want like veggie tacos? And like, how many people do you have? Because we do the same thing. I mean, the only time I would ever maybe even do like a stopping by and saying hi is if I'm meeting in a building, like one of my clients is in the Indeed Tower and they're like on the same floor as another client. I might be like, and I know everyone says, well, I was in the neighborhood, but I literally be like, no, I literally was in the neighborhood. I was like literally down the hall, right? Other than that, same thing for us. We do the same thing.
Let's kind of talk about the difference in networking for career advancement versus business growth. How should those strategies differ, and what are some of the things that someone should be considering when they're going after that, right? The networking of I'm trying to get a career or trying to get a placement versus growing my business and doing things like that. What are some of the different strategies around that?
I mean, I think there's a lot of crossover. I think making sure that you're being selective about where you're going. I will tell you, I give like you mentioned earlier, I give a lot of presentations to a couple of job seeking clubs here where a lot of people are unemployed, right? And I've done that for years because I think sometimes those people are coming from companies where they've been for 25 years.
Yeah.
And they quickly realize that they think they're networked, but they realize they've been networked all within their company, right?
Yeah.
And then when they go through a rift and they're looking around and everyone in their network is in the same situation, it's like, oh, now what do I do, right? So I think it's a little bit of fear factor. You got to get over that fear factor going, but you will dig up potentially job opportunities going to some of these networking events. You have to remember in Austin, or just in general anyways, people aren't always looking to hire, but they might be hiring for the right thing.
Yeah.
So again, not coming across even networking for a career opportunity, not coming across too salesy, making sure, because here's the thing, even though we all know you need a job, that desperation factor makes people worry that you want a job versus a career, right? So doing your homework, and I think often if you're unemployed and you're looking for a new opportunity, offering up and saying, I have industry-related experience is huge. Like I actually have been in your industry. Like I can hit the ground running quickly. Since I'm currently not working, I'll even come in as a consultant. Like we talk about that approach all the time. So I think really kind of like targeting the ones, but coming across again in a softer, if you're going to go to one of these events and think you're going to be flipping resumes, I mean, that's just like as cheesy as it gets.
Just
So
walk in with 20 printed out. That's not a thing.
Exactly. But again, doing it ahead of time, trying to connect with those people ahead of time and saying, I noticed that you are attending this event. I'd love to grab a couple of minutes of your time. Again, sometimes less is more in some of those situations. And I would say the same on the BD side too, right?
Yeah.
The BD side, I mean, I think networking and making sure that, yes, you want to be able to, you can tell if someone's short for time. Yeah. You're like, hey, I would love to catch up with you later. Can I at least share my contact information or give you my business card? Because at least, and again, like more on the softer sales side of things, I think that approach in both ways, making it more personal is always going to be genuine. And then doing your homework, like again, if I want to meet with you and I see that you went to school where you went to school, or like I played Division I college soccer, I see that you're a collegiate athlete, like having something that's going to make them remember you. Like if I met with you and we start talking shop about soccer and you played soccer, and then they're going to be like, I met Josh. I kind of remember what he does, but what I do know is that he was a soccer player. Like that immediately, those kind of like is going to differentiate you, like whether they're an alum, maybe you worked at the same company they worked at, like, and that's where LinkedIn provides you that incredible opportunity to really stalk them beforehand to figure out if there is some camaraderie there. They might be from, I joke because I'm from the Northeast and we have a Northeast recruiting team. So anytime we get a Northeastern job, I'll try to share it and be like, hey, to all my like Northeastern, contacts, right? So if you saw that they were born and raised or went to school there, or if you can try to again have something that you got to leave them making you memorable. Otherwise, you're just like every single person, and that doesn't necessarily need to be something business related. That could be something like that you already know about them, and then it also shows that you've done your homework and your research, which actually shows them something a little bit different about you as well.
I think that LinkedIn is a great place to stalk someone without it being weird, right? Like it's because when you pay for the premium, you can see who's stalking you, right? Yeah. But I actually greatly appreciate it when I'm about to go into a meeting and I go on LinkedIn to look at the person I'm going into a meeting with, and I see that they've already checked me out as well.
Absolutely.
We internally have even created a full marketing strategy out of that, because we found out that when we go to meet with a potential client, within 48 hours prior to or post, they look at everybody's LinkedIn on the team. And so it's become an internal strategy of ours to say, hey, your LinkedIn has to be clean and on point.
You train the same as we do. So I tell people it's like a soft layup. Like if they connect with you on LinkedIn, here, like you said, they already know what you do. Yeah. It's kind of like an open door. Like they didn't connect with you because they know you're an accounting finance recruiter. So it's not going to be crazy to them that you want to talk about an accounting and finance search. So it's kind of like a softer, because I've never been like more of a cold call kind of girl. And so that is kind of more of like it's like a little bit of like a softer like intro, because like you said, they know what's up. They know like, hey, yes, I am connecting with you because like I know what you do. So I'm not going to be surprised when you want to talk about your business or you want to talk about a search I have. We do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So all right, I think we pumped up business owners to get out there at this point, or are people looking for a career advancement. So they're out there and they're networking. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make? We kind of talked about the resume thing and joking. I haven't seen someone walk in with a resume yet, but
I haven't either, but
what are some of the biggest mistakes that you actually see people make when they're out there networking?
I think simply, first point is like, I know this sounds so like minor, but like attire, like I know that's so small, but I know you're in Austin, Texas, and I know everyone's super casual, but dress for the job that you want. People want to know at the end of the day. I'm not saying wear a 3-piece suit. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you're going to a networking event, look like you'd be dressing for an interview, which in Austin typically is, you can get like at least a button down and some slacks. Like don't show up in jeans. Like it just shows us that you're not. How serious are you about your job search? Like I mean, so it's again a first impression thing. And I know it sounds so minor, but I have seen people. I mean, I was at a networking event not too long ago, and there's some people that are considering one of my networking groups, and they kind of showed up like it was like, I don't know, like it was fine. It was just more about like when I'm thinking about who I want in my group and who I'm introducing them to as far as the mid-market, I'm like, like there has to be a level of professionalism there. Yeah. And they knew it was the first time they were going to be meeting me and those kind of things. So, just dress for success. It's never going to hurt you. I'm not saying come in tux. I'm not saying overkill. Like if you've ever seen Step Brothers, where they dress for a tux in an interview, and it's hilarious. Secondly, you got to really kind of don't try to meet with every single person in the room. It's quality over quantity. Don't rush through and stay in the moment, like stay engaged. Because if you're trying to get through like speed dating, then what someone can tell
comes off,
it comes off. So make stay in the moment. Don't be so thinking about so far ahead of what you're talking about. Really embrace like what they're talking about. Become super engaging. Even if you walk away from there and you only made 3 contacts, well, at least you know you made 3 really good, solid contacts and you felt like you were the best version of yourself. I'd say that's where the mistake too is. I think people go in and try to meet with as many people as they can, and then it's super rushed, and they may miss out on something great on a conversation because they become distracted or they're looking around the room for who else they can talk to. I'd say that happens on the BD side too.
Yeah. No, I think that happens a lot on the business development side. And when you're trying to grow your business, we've been at the networking events and the person is just bing, 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 bing. This is what I do. Here's my card, blah, blah, blah. And bouncing, you're like, man, take a breath. Like it's okay. And then, you talk about draft. Know your market, right? Every market's a little bit different. Austin is probably one of the most relaxed spots where there's myself and probably about 3 or 4 other people. And we always joke because we're some of the only ones that show up with a sports coat. And it's such a small thing and it's hilarious. And I'll do jeans and a sports coat, but like people are like, oh, well, you're dressed up. And you're like, it's a sports coat. It is not crazy, but it's, especially here in Austin, that little extra touch is all of a sudden you're dressed up. So it doesn't have to be a full suit, but dress for success, right? Just dress for the people that you want to engage with, the business, the clients, whatever it might be. That's a pretty valuable.
In my world, in your world, they're paying you for a service.
Yeah.
They want to look like, that you're not necessarily working like, in your jammies.
Which has happened sometimes. You're like, what is happening right now?
Exactly.
One of the things you hit on a little bit earlier was tailoring your networking for industry-specific events, right? How can someone go about finding or tailoring their approach specific to their industry or what it is that they're looking for?
I think there's a lot of really great publications out there that will highlight a lot of really good networking, opportunities. Like I know I talked about like Austin Business Journal. I mean, any business journal, really any market typically will highlight a lot of networking opportunities. I also think sponsorship opportunities, depending upon what your budget looks like, really can also be a really good networking opportunity for you as well.
Yeah.
Depending upon what your budget. And when I say sponsor, you don't always have to be the sponsor of an event. You can sponsor your own. I'm getting ready to host one of my own events, right? Where I'm partnering with someone that I know here in Austin and we're going to do our own event. And then you can really, that is a great networking tool because then you really control the crowd.
Yes.
Right. And you just have to make it attractive. The hardest part about that is how do I draw everyone in? Like what's going to be the trigger to draw everyone in, right? But partnering with a really good partner. Free alcohol and free swag. It does. But really partnering like for my world, like people who are in my network, like bankers, investment bankers, like they love to have those hosted at their office, which is because it's a really good opportunity for them as well. So, and I think when you partner with another name that solidifies what you do, it kind of confirms kind of like what you do, right? Like I'm partnering with this bank or I'm partnering with this service provider. Well, gosh, I don't know Laurie, but I do know that service provider. So I feel
they're working together.
If they're working together and they're hosting at their office, well, gosh, I feel like I maybe need to be there, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's not an easy question because I think sometimes like finding the opportunities sometimes are you have to do a little bit of homework and a little bit of digging. I know there's a lot of, there's some technology specific ones. In my world, there's ones that are more accounting and like Texas chapter CPAs for my world, right? Like obviously the networking events, like I'm actually talking to the San Antonio chapter this afternoon. So looking at those not-for-profit organizations that are membership driven are really going to be the ones because they host a lot of events for their members and you can be the non-attendee member, the non-member attendee, right? So really looking
most all of those groups are open to non-members.
Absolutely.
Because they want to grow members.
Because they want to grow members.
They're absolutely welcome. You don't have to be a member to attend most of these groups.
And then offering up, like I said, again, we talk about like the value add. Mm-hmm. If you're an expert like in your space, like offering yourself up to be like a speaker. Like, so the Texas chapter CPAs asked me to be a speaker at their tax conference. Mm-hmm. They're typically not a fan of, they just said, don't sell because they usually don't let recruiters. And I didn't. What I did was actually went through what is the crowd looking for. And in that room, it was about improving your hiring process. We talked about like the do's and don'ts of your hiring process and how your hiring process, I don't care how great your company is, a reflection of your company.
Yeah.
And if your hiring process is fragmented or broken, you could be the best company in the world, but it's a first impression thing on a candidate side of things, right? So you can also be a panelist. I mean, all these things. And this stuff usually is like free, but it will grow your network. You're putting a little skin in the game. Again, it's providing them value, not just always the ask. You will get things in return, but you have to be willing to put things out there first before you do that.
I would also say too, reach out to someone who's in your industry that networks, right? If quick side note, if you're looking for M&A related networking, I know just about every network in town and in Dallas and in Houston, and we know all the ones because we have team members. Or if you're looking for finance and accounting,
yeah, I can tell you.
I'm gonna guess that you know what they are, right? So feel free to reach out to someone who is actively networking and find out what fits and what doesn't. And again, something that I don't think it's unique to Austin, but definitely happens here in Austin. Just about anyone's going to be happy to help you get plugged in.
Yeah.
So, we've talked about getting out there, finding what groups work for you. You lightly hit on this, but let's talk about the role of follow-ups after these events. What is the best way for someone to follow up after going to an in-person event or a social media event? What's your kind of takeaways there?
Again, like I said, I do it in a pretty timely manner. I usually try to do it within 24 to 40 hours because, again, I'm kind of fresh in their mind, right? And I make it casual and I make it something very specific. I think where people go wrong is, again, they try to do quantity over quality.
Yeah.
Don't send some boiler template business email that you're going to send to every single other contact that you talk to. Make it personal, make it time specific. Say, hey, I really, and it takes a little extra time, but I promise you your return will be much better. Hey, I really enjoyed us talking about this, because it's going to trigger, because, especially in an email, they don't have a face to a name anymore, right? And then what I typically do is if I haven't heard back from them by the end of the week, I usually kind of drop them a phone message, because now, if anything, I know people don't go to voicemails, check their voicemail as much, but at least if they check it and what I actually say in there is, hey, I sent you an email, because now, again, I'm not the cold caller, but it gives me a reason to call, right?
Yeah.
Is to say, hey, I'm following up on the email I sent with you, or sent to you, about meeting. I really enjoyed meeting you. Again, keeping it super brief, but following on something, you have a reason to call. You're following up on something that you already followed up on. And then after that point in time, then I just put it on my calendar, usually for more of where I don't know there is something specific, or it's more I'm just trying to drive the relationship and there's not something really specific there. It's usually about a 2-week time frame. I think anything more than that, you become a little bit much. In my world anyways, right? In my world, I have to be time sensitive too about when I do that. Since I'm in the world of finance and accounting, month end close, the first week of every month, no one wants to hear from me or wants a random phone call, right? So for me, email is much better during that time period. And even email during that time period, depending upon what we're working on, can easily get pushed all the way to the bottom. I even tell my team, BD for new clients the first week of the month, do something else.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to fall, you're going to have to do that all over again, right? Because you're just not that we're not the priority of your day when you're in a search, but in order for us to be able to, work with you and get you more, they have to be able to do their job first, right? In order for us to be able to give them additional people to the team. So, but following up with that, and literally you got to put on your calendar. I mean, for me, if I don't put on my calendar, it doesn't exist, know? I mean,
I'm a big...
And I got to do it, for me, I got to do it in the moment. If I don't do it in the moment, that ship has sailed.
I have a random one for you that's not on the list, but when it comes to networking, do you have a preference over the paper business cards or the new digital business cards? Do you have any feedback on that?
I'm so old school. I love my business cards.
So, what's funny too is when I go out, I will actually tell people, if you don't give me a paper card, I will not follow up with you.
Yeah.
If it just ends up in my online phone Rolodex, I'm not going to go through there and search for that. And so I tell people all the time, if you want me to follow up with you, I need a paper business card, because what I will do is the next day is go back through and say, here's all the people I met. Who do I want to follow up with? Full disclosure, I have a digital thing, but I only use it when I run out of business cards or I stop by and I completely forget to have them on me and I, thoroughly apologize. But yeah, paper business cards.
There's another reason too that they don't, and I've run into this, and that's the only reason I know, is in the world of post-COVID, and nobody's necessarily, depending upon how people still feel about that, no one necessarily wants me smacking my phone up against their phone.
So I think we've hit a lot on the in-person networking, finding, stuff that's specific to you, your industry, or what you're looking for. Let's go back to the social media aspect and leveraging LinkedIn effectively. What are some of the underutilized tools or LinkedIn features that you see professionals not using?
The reference function. I mean, I have hundreds. I mean, I even my poor team, I'm sorry team, but I hone on my team too. It's on their calendar every week. They should be asking for 2 to 3 new professional references on there. It's super easy. People don't ask for it all the time, but I will tell you, even for me, right now we're in the process of hiring in Austin and Houston and Dallas, and I'm going to look at how many references you have. And honestly, because I have over, like, for every year in this business, there's a kind of a formula that goes in that. I mean, I have 100 plus something, and it's a mix of candidates and clients, because you can ask, because what's great about references is you take that reference and you turn it into a social media post. I'm all about now, I'm working smarter, not harder. So get that really great reference that you have, now use it as a post, and now you're solidifying, now it's like 2 for 1, right? And when I put the post, I don't put specifically who it is, right? People could probably figure it out if they go down to my references, but if anything, I put like, reference from, I'm so humbled, or like, I just was so, I love the fact that I had the ability to work with this client. I just got this reference, and and I put like Austin CEO or Austin CFO or whatever it might be, right? But I think it's a highly underutilized part of LinkedIn that people don't use very often. And I think they think it's because it's awkward or weird. I'm not asking for references of someone that wouldn't, give you a good reference, that kind of, and not that I wouldn't give you a good reference, but someone that you've worked with, someone that is you've kind of like proven yourself with. And it's really easy for them to do. It's like a LinkedIn message. They can put whatever they want in there. You get to review it first, which is, I think people are worried about that. Like someone to post a reference on me that I don't love. So you can either accept it or decline it, or you can actually prompt them to edit it. I love my clients and my candidates, but sometimes they have misspellings and grammar in there where I'm like, could you just like go back and tweak that? Because like I'm a stickler for that on my LinkedIn, right? I think it's a highly underutilized function. I think groups are as well. Because when you post something, part of the special or the sweet sauce or special sauce of LinkedIn is when you post, take that post and go tag all those groups you're in. So when you're posting once, you should be going back. Like when I post a job, I'm tagging the Texas chapter of CPAs. I'm tagging the Texas Society of Executives. I'm tagging like all these groups that are specific to that. So when you have one post, make the most of it and tag all those groups, because typically those groups are only allowing you in. Not everyone's in that group. Sometimes they have to they're not allowing everyone in. So using one post and making more of that. So you're literally taking a reference, turning it into a social media post, and then you're taking that post and then you're actually like what you've just created. I'm all about things working for you while you're working. Now that's working for you behind the scenes while you're working. But I do think the references and the groups are kind of like a really highly underutilized function for sure.
I know. I absolutely underutilized those. No, don't. That is, I don't think there's one in the last 5 years. But while we're on LinkedIn, let's talk about content on LinkedIn. What are some of the pros and cons about producing AI content versus original content or just mass producing content on LinkedIn? What are some of the pros and cons you see around content on LinkedIn?
You have to really be reflective about what you want your brand to look like, right? And we talk about this time within StevenDouglas. Like, how do you want it? It's all about your perception's reality. So how do you want to come across? So I think like for us, like with me, my brand, and everyone at StevenDouglas is different. You'll never see me really share anything. I am a working mom. I'm super proud of that. I'm super supportive of that. My son is 19. I don't share much about that part of my life. Not that I don't talk about it.
LinkedIn.
Not on LinkedIn for me, but we have other people within my firm that's part of their brand. Like, and I would tell you, people like that part. Like they're like, I feel like I know them more. They're more personal. It's just whatever you're comfortable with, but also staying like, making sure when anyone at our firm does share something more personal, they eventually tie it back to something relatable to business. So if you are going to share that, making sure you're tying it back to something, you're still circling back of how that with your child or with your family applied or helped you within your life or helped you within your career or your business mind, right? So I think that thinking about how you, like who your audience is really, and really making sure that your LinkedIn profile, I know this is simple, please have a picture. If you're going to network, you got to have a picture. People want to place a face to a name. They just do. And it's not that hard. You can get a professional picture and you can do it on your own and those kind of things. I think ChatGPT and AI is really great with taking your own, because we talked about this earlier, taking your own thoughts and putting it into a format that you feel like, okay, that is written a lot better, especially if writing is not your forte.
Yeah.
I actually love to write. If I had time, I'd love to just write on the side. That's why I do like an article every week. I love to write, right? Some people are kind of struggle with that. They have like a really good idea. They're just not sure how to get it into like a format, that's what ChatGPT is great at. Put all your thoughts on paper and then it's going to write something up for you, but just don't post it. Go back through there. And we were talking about that earlier. Does it sound like me?
Yeah.
Because people can spot it a mile away when they've been following you that it doesn't sound like you.
Yep.
Right. And then they're kind of like, she or he's kind of becoming that person because they are looking for authenticity. I think sometimes less is more, though. Like I said, I think if you're going to put something, I'm not saying like when I write articles, because I try to write an article at least a week. That sometimes could be a little bit longer, but people know what they're getting when they're looking at an article. I think for a post, a little bit more short and to the point, I think more people will follow. I know you just got to think about like, who's my audience? In my world, it's a conservative audience. It's accounting and finance. How do I want to be perceived? And making sure that you're not crossing over that line of talking about something that's going to be overly controversial. I mean, I'm not saying you don't want people's ideas. I'm saying that this is not a platform to create unnecessary arguments, right?
I think knowing your audience is
really
my
important.
key takeaway from that, and tailoring that content to that audience. With our content, we produce a lot of content at Lion, and it's targeted for business owners. And, we do weekly blog posts, and then we do quarterly industry updates. And those are specifically targeted to certain industries that we work the most in. And we know that that's who's on our page and who's following and who's engaging. And so I would also say, that didn't happen overnight. That is a couple of years of producing content. And I think you hit earlier, it didn't work. And then coming back and saying, what are you guys actually interested in?
Right.
Oh. And the one of the funny ones for us is content on LinkedIn. The quarterly updates was a kind of a throwing something against the wall, and it's become one of our most utilized pieces of content. So where we're now hitting quarterly updates on 10 to 15 industries over time. And I would say almost every one of them has been a requested industry for either one of our referral partners or clients that we're trying to target. And so, and those are actually pretty easy for us to put together because we have data sources that we keep. And so knowing your audience and producing what it is that they're actually interested in is a huge piece. And then it leads into the networking and who's engaging with you and all of that.
And you just hit on it, though. I think sometimes when you've been doing this for a while in your business, you stop doing the things that you know that work. You know that that's working. So you make sure that you don't stop doing that, working, and I mean, even to a point where if you kind of feel at a crossroads, there is a survey part on LinkedIn. Ask your followers. I've done this before when I kind of feel like I'm not getting like the follows or I'm not getting as much of a response as I normally would get. There's a survey. What would you like to see more from me? Would you rather see job posts? Would you rather see more content related to your industry? Would you rather see more articles? Like, it's okay to do that. That's what that survey, I don't even know if everyone knows. There's a survey function on there too that you can go through as well. But I think when something is working, keep doing what's working. I think sometimes I've seen people in all businesses stop doing, and you even ask yourself, like, is it self-sabotage? Like, why am I not doing the things that I know that work? Like, and so sometimes you just kind of like have to refresh yourself a little bit.
As we wrap up here on networking, let's talk about measuring your networking success. How do you personally gauge whether your networking efforts are having value add or benefit? How do you gauge if it's working for you?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, when I go in, I'm like 3 new contacts, right?
3 new contacts.
And 3 new contacts. And if I don't walk away there with 3 new contacts, or if I've had enough opportunity to kind of circulate the room, I kind of make sure I'm making not just a mental note, but a written note about that particular networking event so that I don't get, unfortunately, kind of pulled into that again, right? Yeah. And then were those 3 networking contacts to those, and then I kind of look at that probably a month later to see if there was any production for those, from those, like, did anything actually result of those, like at least a conversation or anything. And then if it really hasn't, then I have to kind of think about like, where else am I kind of spending my time. So it's not always like a perfect science as far as measuring it. I think the biggest, I think my biggest recommendation or suggestion was making sure that the events, you can easily get pulled back into an event that you kind of know isn't going to, like for me, I'll give you an example. I went to the Williamson Economic Summit at Kalahari in December.
Yeah.
I already knew going in it's going to be like a lot of like mayors and state agencies, but that's it. So I didn't go there to network. I didn't. I went there because I wanted to be more informative about the growth in Austin. So sometimes going to these events where you can be a little bit more, have the ability to speak a little bit more intelligently about that. Like for me, it was more, I have so many people that are moving here, that are moving here to Austin and kind of want to know like what the lay of the land looks like what the growth looks like. So I went there as more of an informational session for me. So sometimes networking events could be networking on the surface, but they could actually really kind of help you speak better to your business or actually help your clients at some level. Like they talked about roadways and water and all those kind of things. But I knew going in that wasn't going to be a networking because I've been to that before.
Yeah.
Right. So measuring up by success, it just determines like what does success mean in your business, right? For me, it could be candidates, it could be clients, it could be bigger networking relationships. Like I don't know if you came to the event we had at the Austin FC Stadium.
No, I missed that one.
We had through my relationships here, and that was a huge audience. We had the global director for the Texas Stock Exchange come down and give a whole presentation from Dallas. And that was through my networking through someone that I knew here, who's now the Southwest. She's now the Southwest representative for the New York Stock Exchange. She's like, because I knew a little snippet about the global Texas Stock Exchange. I couldn't speak to it intelligently about what its differentiator was. Now I can after just seeing an hour-long presentation.
Yeah.
I know what their past, present, and future looks like. I know if you're asking me what the difference is going to be and what their plan is between being on the NASDAQ or the Texas Stock Exchange or any of the smaller exchanges, what kind of their play is. I couldn't do that before. That's extremely useful in my world when I'm talking about companies that are either pre-IPO or companies that are moving here and don't really know a lay of the land. So sometimes networking can also be informational. You just it's a little bit of trial and error. But I think the biggest advantage is asking someone that you know that may have been to an event before.
Yeah.
That's going to give you like the shorter path to the right solution, really. Or going together too. I think not everybody likes to go into a room alone. I think going with a buddy is always super helpful too.
I have a very strong networking buddy that we tag team events with. So that's definitely beneficial. So I said we were going to wrap up, but you led me into another question.
I got all the time in the world now.
Yeah. We talked a lot about a lot of the free events and stuff you can just show up to, but we didn't really hit on is the kind of more strategic paid networking groups. You and I both happen to be a part of a paid networking group called Provise. So throw that out there before I ask this next question of what is your opinion on the higher level paid networking groups versus just showing up to happy hours and things like that? Do you have a preference or an opinion on those?
I think since there's a barrier to entry on the paid groups, I would say for the most part, you're always going to get a different, I don't want to say quality, but you have people there that you're surrounded by that are there for an initiative and the same reason that typically that you are. So not that these other networking groups aren't great. It's just that everybody there kind of has like there's more of an agenda.
Yes.
And you kind of feel walking away from there that you left of something of value. And not to say that the open networking groups aren't great, but again, those are free-for-alls and anyone can go, and that's great. But I would say the ones that are paid, it's the people that are a little bit more serious or committed to what they're doing. And if you're not sure, just like I did with the group that you and I are part of, I wasn't sure because I had never heard of them before. Again, how I got introduced was someone that I knew that worked at a very, very specific finance and accounting networking group. That's where I knew her from, and she leads the Texas group. To me, from the outside, I didn't really get it, and so I guested, which means you guessed for free, which means you got to. And I would highly suggest that you do that for any paid group before you make that commitment, because typically the fees when you are in a group are not refundable. So
the guessing too is huge. So when it comes to Provisors, the very first group that I guessed it at probably wasn't the greatest fit for me. And I guessed and I was like, man, I guess I can make this work, but I wasn't so sure. And then someone else was like, well, why don't you check out this group? I actually think you would fit better in this group. Yeah. And they let me guess again. And I went and I guessed and I was like, oh, this is the group. Yeah, absolutely. I fit in this with these people. I would also say to you, I think you hit on it's the intentionality. When you get into the upper level networking and these paid networking groups, everyone knows why everyone's there.
Absolutely.
And you know, my goal is to expand my network and provide value-added resources for my clients. And so for me, it's the how can I plug these individuals in to make me a better professional and all of that. So definitely I think we're both on the same page.
Yeah, and finding out
they work.
and asking them like kind of what your screening process is, right? Like, well, what is your screening and vetting process? Me now being a group leader, I know exactly what that is, right? But there are other groups. I was in another group, another one that did have barrier to entry, and after a year, I just kind of reevaluated and said, what is my ROI?
Yeah.
Zero. And a lot of these, like specifically my firm is paying for too as well. So it's not just about me and what's being productive, but how much sense does it make, like from a cost perspective, right? So I think, but again, I not that the open networking ones aren't great, but it's kind of hard to get, I would say sometimes, some ongoing really great dialogue because people are all there for different reasons. And I think sometimes they become a little bit more social in nature, which is fine. But when you have people that are committed and actually have a paid membership, they are like, hey, like, what are we doing? Like, like we could talk about all day long, but let's execute. I mean, that's one of the things that was attractive about Provisors for me is there's always an agenda. It's not like, hey, let's just like throw up and just talk about whatever, right? Like there's an agenda. It's always fresh. They get, for me, I get mine in at 7 and you're out at 9, so I think that really looking at the ones that actually have some type of vetting process will better benefit you, but always ask the guests before you make that commitment.
We hit mostly on networking today, but that's not what you do network, but that's not your core. So why don't you wrap up, tell the audience how to get a hold of you and StevenDouglas, and one more time, just what it is that you guys specialize in.
Sure. We are executive search professionals specific in accounting and finance across the U.S. We are a national search firm. We cover over 26, maybe in 27 markets right now. I'd say the only area maybe that we don't touch upon is the West Coast. Our differentiator is we're very opportunistic in nature and we hire people. We don't take people and send them into a market. We hire people that know the market really well. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get like local market intel, but the support of a very large search firm. So for me, like if I already know from 18 years of doing this, what's here and what's not here. So I know immediately when I have a search and I have to go out to, the 26 other markets that we're in.
Yeah.
We are, like I said, based out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We have other verticals within StevenDouglas as well. I stay in my lane, but we have technology search. We have supply chain search. We have HR search. We also have some industry experts that are in pharma and biotech and legal. And then we have an interim resources group, which is interim resources is not a temp or temp to hire. It is a project-based resources group, people that just like to do project work for us. And we have that across all of the different regions that we work in the U.S. There's 6 of us managing directors. I sit here. We use investment banker titles here. So I sit here over the whole state of Texas. We have 1 in Chicago. We have 1 in New York. We have 1 on the East Coast. And then we have 2 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where we're based out of. So we're a top 10 executive search firm. We're an Inc. 5000 company. That's a little bit about us.
How does someone get a hold of you if they want to chat more?
Great question. So my email address, which is lcanepa@StevenDouglas.com, and that's Steven with a V. Or my phone, my direct line is 512-569-5334. Texting, calls always work. Email, I'm probably more responsive to immediately just because a lot of times I have to put that phone on silent to get anything done. And then also linking up with me on LinkedIn, because once you link with me, then you link with the other 33,000 people that actually, I don't even know how many connections because they don't tell you once you're over 500 plus, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, and then you can, and then following us, obviously, I think StevenDouglas, we just crossed the echelon of a 250,000. We're over 250,000 followers, which is huge. We've had over 30% growth since I started here, almost 4 years ago. So following me too, that way you'll always be able to see what I'm posting, and then following StevenDouglas as well. You always kind of be in the know on any type of opportunities we're working on.
Perfect.
Great.
All right. So if you enjoyed what you heard on our conversation today, we would enjoy you keep the conversation going. You can follow us or find us on X or Twitter at the EXP Exchange, or visit our website, theexpertexchange.pro. That's the expertexchange.pro. And for more information and resources related to networking or financial, or if you're looking for a job in the finance and accounting world, you can reach out to our expert guest, Laurie, and she will reshare her information, or you can find her online at StevenDouglas.com. That's StevenDouglas.com. So remember, success is a journey, and we are thrilled to be a part of yours, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Expert Exchange.
Content on this show is information of a general nature and does not address the circumstances of any particular individual or entity. Nothing in this show constitutes professional or financial advice, nor does any information on the show constitute a comprehensive or complete statement of the matters discussed or the law relating thereto. The Expert Exchange is not a fiduciary by virtue of any person's use of or access to this content. You alone assume the sole responsibility of evaluating the merits and risks associated with the use of any information or content on the show before making any decisions based on such information. In exchange for using the content, you agree not to hold the Expert Exchange, its affiliates, or any third-party service provider liable for any possible claim for damages arising from any decision you make based on information or other content made available to you through the show. The Expert Exchange is not licensed to practice law or provide legal advice. Nothing contained within this show is intended to be an offer to either buy or sell securities.